I'm here with Ardith Goodwin, and Ardith has some really cool techniques, and I think it's amazing. We're making this painting of a church.
We are.
And it's actually based on a photograph, you said?
It is a photograph. I'm going to teach you how to do a chalk transfer on tar paper.
Because I was going to say, I can't draw, but you said this is drawing proof.
This is drawing proof.
Great, let's get started.
Okay, so the first thing you want to do is start with a photograph that you love of a building or a place that you love. And there's two types of paper. This is photo paper, it's glossy. I would avoid using that one because the chalk does not like it.
Okay.
So I tend to use cardstock or a matte paper. And I want to print it in about the size of the painting that I want to work on.
So if you're making a really big painting, you'd need to go to like some sort of office store
and get it printed on matte paper, and you can do this as big as you wanted to.
Okay.
So once I have the photograph, and this is a pretty complicated photograph looking, but the process makes it very simple. I need to make a chalk transfer. So
What is a chalk transfer?
A chalk transfer is where you take the photograph, you go turn it over, flip it to the back, and you just pull chalk.
But you're just rubbing on the back of a photograph, or have you done something to the photograph already?
I am simply rubbing on the back of the photograph. The key is you want to have 2 layers.
And when your chalk breaks, then you have 2 pieces of chalk to work with next time.
You do. So you go one layer, and then you shake it off and do another layer.
Okay.
And once you get a double coat of chalk.
Because you just want enough chalk.
You want enough chalk because tar paper is textured and thick, and you want to make sure that it adheres. So then you're going to flip it over. Now here's the key. Once you flip it, you don't want it to pick back up.
This is a flip it once.
Right. You can use clamps to hold it down, or you could just simply put pressure with one hand.
Could you use a piece of tape or something, or the tape will peel the tar?
You could use probably duct tape, but the tape's not going to adhere very well to the tar paper, but the clamps work great. Once you get it set, you want a hard stylus or a ballpoint pen. It doesn't matter if you draw on the photograph itself, and you simply start tracing.
Sometimes I find it easier to draw on the photograph only because then I remember what parts I've traced.
What parts you've traced.
Parts I haven't.
And you're going over the basic lines, and you can see that I am scribbling. I am not paying attention to exact details. That is not the point. I want the basic structure of this church.
So if you had already used this photo like you have, you could use a colored pen in a different color to make sure that you knew where you were going.
You could. And you could do multiple prints of this, because what ends up happening is it creates a ridge on the back, and the chalk sticks easier to it.
Cool.
So you can see
it's like you just drew on there.
Like I just drew it.
So even though the tar paper's textured, the transfer still works.
The transfer still works. So I'm going to hand this to you.
And for somebody who doesn't know what tar paper is.
It is roofing felt. You can get it at the hardware store. It actually goes on the roof.
I love those kind of supplies.
So once you have the transfer set, you can see it is not an exact replica, and it's not a real tight form, but you don't want a real tight form. I'm ready to start painting. And Kardinsky is an artist that I love, and he used unexpected, bold pops of color. So that's what I'm going to do.
So how did you first discover tar paper? Were you just wandering down the aisles at your home improvement store and just found it and thought, I can paint on that?
Actually, I saw an artist use it in Alabama, and he travels the world painting on tar paper, and I was so inspired. And then Kardinsky uses a black ground, and I thought that would be a great tar paper process.
Cool.
So the key to painting on tar paper is you want to either mix your colors with white to make them opaque, or you want to use opaque paint.
And the reason for that is just because it's black.
Just because it's black, transparent colors are not going to show up very well.
Now, I assume because it's a roofing material, it takes moisture really well, and you're not that worried about it like buckling or wrinkling.
Nope.
Or can you put too much paint on it?
You could put too much watery paint, and you're going to lose your chalk. The key to painting like this is you don't want to paint over your chalk line. You want to leave the chalk line, and you can tell that some of the details are pretty small. So you're going to want a smaller brush.
I always say, like, don't be afraid to use a teeny tiny brush to really get the detail that you want.
To really get into the details. So you just begin and start base coating.
So now where you have some of the color sort of in the center here that's a little duller than some of the other color, is that because you didn't mix it with white?
I didn't mix it with white, and I can use it as an underpaint or a base coat and come back when I get to the highlights and the lights and dark stage. So that's the next step. I want a good coverage. So we get to here. And you can see how I start blending in as I go.
I love how you are using multiple colors in here, and like you're in the lines, but you're not being picky about it.
Not being picky at all. And the church itself is a pale yellowish white. I'm not trying to render it exactly because I'm not trying to paint realism. I'm trying to paint the expression of a beautiful building. And then once you get it painted out and you can push your darks and lights, this chalk line's gonna disappear, which makes it dramatic.
How is it going to disappear?
We're gonna use a sponge, just a damp sponge. I think I'll do it on this one.
Oh,
I'm gonna keep this one. All right, so if you can see where it's painted in the chalk, the sponge just magically takes the chalk away,
magical.
and you get this yummy, delicious chalk line that goes away, and you get contrast.
So it's like a grout line of some kind, or it's just, again, like that little, the background coming forward in a weird way.
In a weird way, it's kind of stained glass-like.
Yeah, and so then I notice in your finished one, you've simply placed it under glass. Do you do any other kind of finish to it before it goes in a frame?
If you're gonna frame it under glass, you don't need to varnish it. But if you're not gonna frame it under glass, then you can put a water-based varnish, or if you wanna age it and antique it, you can use an oil-based varnish.
So I'm assuming you've actually varnished then these little ones to protect them from the light.
Yes, I have. I used a matte varnish for those so they're not as glossy. They still take the chalk away, but they seal it so they're protected and they don't have to be framed under glass.
And now is this tar paper that you've just glued on top of these little canvases?
You can totally do that, or glue it onto wood, or you can just paint black flat matte paint and use the same process on canvas.
Oh, so if you can't find tar paper or you want to use a canvas, you can just use paint as the base.
You can totally just use paint.
And it all works the same way.
As long as it's flat and matte.
Flat and matte.
Because the chalk will need to adhere to it.
Okay, I'm gonna remember that. Thank you, Ardith.
You're welcome.
This was great.